So how do we attain this optimal health? Well, your body wants to balance itself. It wants to be balanced. I spend way too much time in Walmart. Way too much time. I have, like I said, I got 5 kids and I got 2 stepsons. It'll be 18 in December. Every time I go to the store, I buy 3 gallons of milk. Those boys can drink a gallon of milk a day. I'm like, have you ever heard of water? If you're thirsty, just drink some water every now and then. But the body is trying to stay in balance. If you ever get that shopping cart at Walmart that's got the bad wheel, have you ever done that? It just messes up the whole experience, doesn't it? I'm a professional Walmart shopper. I grab that cart. It takes me about half a second. I go, whoop, whoop, Nope. I may go through 3 or 4 before I start. Balance. Your body's attempt to balance all of the organ systems, all of the physiological functions that are going on is called homeostasis. And it really is balance. And when you break down the term even, looking at the Greek foundation, homeostasis means to stand equally. It's a whole lot easier to be balanced on 2 legs, right? Now, some of you people that do yoga, first, let me just say mad respect, because if you've ever done yoga, you will never make fun of yoga ever again. I got my first taste of yoga with P90X years ago. There's this thing called Yoga X. Don't do it. Just don't. Just say no. After about 30 minutes, I remember doing this one downward, upward dog warrior something. I don't know what it was. I just remember bending down and sweat pouring off of me that looked like rain from Harvey. I'm like, why am I sweating and breathing so hard? It's just yoga. Standing equally is not easy. Your body balancing itself is not passive. It's difficult. And so I love the fact that as we look at homeostasis, we're going to have information coming in, a lot of our receptors. Our central nervous system is going to coordinate that. And we're going to come up with a response of how we manage the conditions of our body based on what we're exposed to. And so even though I'm standing still, my body is by no stretch of the imagination being still. Receptors from my muscles are going to my brain. My brain is signaling the cerebellum to coordinate the tension of those muscles that I need to stand perfectly still. Homeostasis is dynamic constancy. Almost like oxymorons, right? Constant doesn't sound very dynamic. It sounds passive still. But dynamic constancy, that's what your body is attempting to do. That's what homeostasis is all about. Standing equally, but working hard to make it happen. Now, how does it happen? Sort of introduce it. First, you're going to have a stimulus. Your body is using its receptors to give you information about what's going on inside your body and outside your body. Now, I don't know about you, I've enjoyed 70-degree high temperatures lately. Because typically at this time of the year, instead of 70, it's about 170 in East Texas. And when you walk outside of the air conditioning and you hit 105 degrees, you're going to get a stimulus. Whew, it is hot, it is humid, it is nasty. And your body's going to respond to that if you're out in this heat for any period of time. And so your receptors are going to signal your brain. Your brain is going to say, okay, we're heating up. We need to do something about that if they don't get back into the air conditioning pretty quick. And there's going to be a physiological result of the activity that's triggered by the central nervous system. So this loop, you have a stimulus and then you have a result of that stimulus. to try to get our body back into this nice, well-balanced state. That is our homeostatic unit. That is our homeostatic cycle. So whether we're talking body temperature, whether we're talking blood pressure, whether we're talking fluid volume, whether we're talking about sugar level in the blood, we could go on and on and on and on and on about all of these different states that your body's controlling at the same time. All of these things have interrelated receptors, interrelated to certainly our central nervous system, and different effectors that are going to be responsible for doing different things to help your body stay in balance. So let's look at a few examples. Oh, before we get to our examples, this is just a little graphic. Your stimulus, receptors, control center, what effector is in place, and then bottom line, what is the result? Here we're too low with something. And what do? We put it back in the middle. What would happen if for some reason our stimulus said, okay, something's too high? What's your body going to do? Work to lower it. It's going to work to lower it. That's typically how our body works. If it's too high, we're going to lower it, get it in place. If it's too low, we're going to raise it to get it in place. So, body temperature. What is normal body temperature? Be very careful. That's kind of a trick question. And by the way, I try to trick you in here. I don't trick you on the test. I try to trick you in here. Normal body temperature. What's your normal body temperature? 98.6 is typically what we think of, right? But it's going to depend on the time of day. Your body temperature changes depending on whether you're asleep, whether you're awake. So there's a normal range. So we say 98.6 is the set point. But if you look, here's 7 a.m. Do many of you ever see 7 a.m.? I hate 7 a.m. But you can see when you first wake up, we're at 97.6. And when you're in the middle of your day, your muscles are working, generating energy, but also producing heat. You may get upwards of 99 degrees. But then, when you go to sleep, and again, they're saying you're going to sleep at 11 or 12. I know most of you don't. But, down here about 4 o'clock, we're back down to 97. So, there's these cyclical aspects to everything going on in your body. But body temperature is important. Here's our hot day, right? It's hot outside. You have sensors in your skin. You have internal sensors that let your brain know, okay, it's hot on our skin. Our body temperature is increasing because we live in Texas and we're roasting. Your brain says, this is not good because if we get above 105 degrees as our body temperature, brain cells start to pop. Do you regrow brain cells? Not really, no. So that's a bad day. So we have to cool. So your brain signals your sweat glands to do what? Kick into high gear. The moisture on your skin, as it evaporates, it liberates heat from the body. It cools your skin. So your body's too hot. What's the homeostatic response? Try to lower your body temperature. And you cool off. It's pretty straightforward, right? But guess what? Your systems of your body, this is largely integumentary system. They're not totally independent. Because now what's going to happen the longer you stay out in that heat and the more that you sweat, what's going to happen? You're going to get fatigued, absolutely. And one of the main reasons you get fatigued when it's hot and you're sweating is what? Dehydration. So you're losing fluid to cool your body. Well, guess what? Now you're dehydrating. Fluid volume relates to blood pressure and all sorts of other things. So now you have sensors in your body to say, wait a minute, where's our fluid volume going? Our sodium concentration's way too high. The brain says, okay, this is not cool. The hypothalamus is going to signal the pituitary gland to secrete a substance called antidiuretic hormone or vasopressin. Vasopressin is going to cause your kidneys to conserve water. Your urine volume is going to decrease and your body's going to conserve the water. For how long? Until you stop sweating or until you go somewhere and you drink some water. Because your brain is also going to be signaling you, say, dude, you're thirsty. Go drink some water. Go do it now before it's too late. So do you see the homeostatic balance? Okay, one will absolutely affect the other. Nothing in your body is mutually exclusive. Nothing is completely independent. This is what particularly makes the human body such an amazing machine. It's a biochemical machine. Absolutely elegant. Now notice I said earlier in our little illustration that had our gauge, when your body temperature is too high, what is your body going to try to do? Lower it, cool off. If your body temperature is too low, what is your body going to try to do? Warm it up. So if you notice the input coming in, too hot or too cold, is going to result in your body trying to do the opposite. Too hot, let's cool down. Too cool, let's warm up. That sort of feedback that you're getting in response is called a negative feedback loop. Because your kidneys are not going to stop producing urine the rest of your life just because you got hot one time. As soon as you cool down, as soon as you stop sweating, as soon as you drink some fluid, your body's going to respond by producing less ADH, allowing your body to produce more urine to get back into that homeostatic balance. So in situations where the input is the stimulus is the opposite of the result, that is negative feedback. This is the most common response that your body uses to try to attain a homeostatic balance. So here's another. Sugar level. Sugar's pretty important, right? You got to have glucose, one of the major sources of energy production. Now your body can use triglycerides, fats, to produce energy as well. But when you have a ton of glucose in your circulation, it's bad. You could go into a diabetic coma. And so your body sees high sugar, and what's the response going to be? We got to lower it. And so your body senses that. B cells in your pancreas get signaled to secrete what the hormone do we have for sugar? Insulin. Insulin causes your cells to take up more sugar and store it, thereby lowering your blood sugar level. That's the homeostatic balance that we have when we have too much sugar. What about first thing in the morning when you wake up? Typically, what is your blood sugar going to be when you first wake up? It's going to be low, and it's going to be too low. So in that case, we also have another feedback loop that signals and says we need more blood sugar while you're asleep. And so you're also going to have the central nervous system signaling, again, the pancreas, but different cells in the pancreas. These are called alpha cells. Alpha cells are going to release a hormone called glucagon. Man, science has a lot of terms, and a lot of them sound a whole lot alike. Glucose is stored as glycogen. Glycogen can be broken down back into glucose by the hormone glucagon. Do you hear how all these sound alike? This is just where you have to straight up commit these to memory. But as glucagon is produced, it is going to recruit the glucose out of the cells. It's placed back into the bloodstream, and it makes your blood sugar go up. So let me ask you this question. If insulin is a response to cause high blood glucose to go down, and we said what kind of feedback was that? Negative feedback. What kind of feedback causes glucose to be put into the bloodstream to go from low glucose to high glucose? What kind of feedback would that be? Careful, that's a trick question. It's still negative. even though you're increasing blood sugar, which sounds like a positive thing, right? Increase. That response, increasing, is opposite of the stimulus, which was what? Low. So as long as it's opposite, regardless of the direction, it's still a negative feedback loop. And so in this case, we have two different systems, two different negative feedback loops, working to maintain a very narrow range of your blood sugar. It's like in your home having an air conditioner and a furnace or a heater. We only usually run one of those at a time, right? In the summer, we're running the AC. In the winter, we're running the heat. But if you wanted to really narrow that range every day, you would run both at the same time. So if it got a little too cold, the heat would come on. If it got a little too warm, the AC would come on. That would narrow it even more. That's what your body is accomplishing. These systems are referred to as antagonistic. It's like a tug of war in both directions, but what it does, what it seeks to do, is narrow that range of your blood sugar because it is just that critical and just that important. So here's a little illustration of our cycle. High blood glucose. There's our insulin from our beta cells, causing the glucose to move out of the blood. And likewise, once it moves out, our blood sugar is going to drop. Then to get it high enough to be in the right range, we got our alpha cells and glucagon, which causes the release of the glucose back into the body. And these two systems are continually working together at the same time. One is usually going to be more dominant than the other to maintain the proper sugar level of your blood. So if we think of that oscillating cycle that we saw for negative feedback, that's one way our body functions. The other way our body functions, and it's much less common, and that is a positive feedback loop. Now, the thing I want you to imagine with a positive feedback loop is a chain reaction. When someone says chain reaction, what do you usually think about? Domino effect. I think of a nuclear reactor because a chain reaction is going to be a bad thing when this thing gets out of control. So in this case, a positive feedback is the result is going to be the same as the effect. So let's think about our blood sugar. If our blood sugar were composed and affected by positive feedback, what would be the result of detecting high sugar? It would go up even more and more and more, the same direction. That's a bad thing. Positive feedback creates a very unstable situation. That's why it's extremely rare that you find it in biological systems. But it does exist. Here's an example. Population. So when we look at our population, what do humans produce that increases our population? Babies. So the more humans you have, the more babies they're going to produce, right? Well, the more babies you produce, that's more humans, right? More humans, more babies, more. Do you see how it's just going to continue up and up and up and you get that exponential growth? That's sort of a means in which we can look at population growth as being positive feedback. Yes, ma'am. So when you get to circulatory system, you get to the physiology of that. When you have a cut and you begin a clotting cascade, one of the means in which you do that is create something called a platelet plug. You've all heard of platelets in your blood? They're going to become activated. As they become activated, they become sticky. They're going to release certain hormones, certain chemicals that causes the activation of other platelets. So as you activate platelets, again, that's another example. As you activate platelets, you activate more platelets. As you activate more platelets, that is an example of a positive feedback. With positive feedback, I think you can see there's got to be a way to stop it. If you didn't have a means in which to stop a blood clot, all the blood in your body would coagulate. So there's got to be a means in which you stop a biological positive feedback. And so our system that we look at is childbirth. So, the infant that's ready to be delivered at 40 weeks of gestation. Ladies, I got bad news for you. When you deliver your baby, it's not up to you, it's up to the baby. That baby's going to start controlling your life as soon as you discover you're pregnant, and that control's not going to stop until they're probably 50. Nor will the request for money. So the baby will signal your muscles of your uterus to begin to contract. The baby's going to produce a hormone. The contractions of the uterus then are detected, and that information is sent to your brain, where your brain will cause the release of a hormone called oxytocin from your pituitary. So contractions lead to the secretion of oxytocin. Oxytocin leads to more frequent and stronger what? Contractions that then are positively fed back to the brain and pituitary to produce more what? Oxytocin. Do you see? That's why as labor progresses, the time between contractions shortens and the strength of the contractions increase. But the good news, ladies, you're not in labor the rest of your life. What stops that positive feedback loop? Delivery of the baby. So there has to be a way to stop it. With our coagulation cascade, there are other chemicals produce other cells involved, that as they increase, they're going to have a negative impact on the clotting cascade, and that's how we stop that. So do we see positive feedback? Do we see how it is unstable? It's a chain reaction, but you have to have a system of brakes to stop it. Negative feedback sort of controls itself, and it keeps it sort of really more in balance. So negative feedback, much more common than we see with positive. Here's another positive feedback. And again, it relates to having babies and birth. And again, more of those seem to be related to that or at the chemical level. Here we see that toward the end of pregnancy, your mammary glands are going to begin to produce milk. But they're not expressed immediately. It's the suckling of a newborn that's going to begin the expression of the milk proteins from the glands. Now, the first milk the baby gets doesn't have milk protein. It's a clear viscous substance called colostrum. It's filled with antibodies. That's going to help provide the baby with some passive immunity for the first couple of days and weeks of their life. Then the suckling causes more milk to be produced. And what hormone is that going to be again? Oxytocin. Oxytocin causes more milk to be produced. Well, if the baby finds out there's more milk, what's the baby going to do more? As it grows, suckle. More suckling leads to more oxytocin, more milk, positive feedback. What stops this positive feedback? When the baby stops feeding, when you wean the baby, when the suckling stops. So you see you have the brakes that are placed on. Now, I also have some interesting news. Just keep this in mind. Oxytocin is also famous for something else. Is there another name for oxytocin, a layperson's name? Oxytocin is called the love hormone. As you have, bless you, as you have these feelings of affection for someone, the holding of hands, the hugging, and you can fill all the other physical contact things into that blank. All of those actions lead to the greater production of oxytocin. And it's oxytocin that gives you that feeling and butterflies in your stomach of, oh, I'm in love with them. That can either be good or bad, just depending on who you're with. So oxytocin is the love hormone, but it's very much involved in positive feedback. And when you think of the love hormone, the more you're affectionate with someone, the more oxytocin you produce, that you see, that's also positive feedback. I hate to think of what puts the brakes on that. It's either breaking up or marriage. I'm not sure which. I'm kidding. I'm going to erase that from the tape. Okay. Yeah, don't want my wife to hear that one.